I was sitting in the doctor's waiting room, staring at a stack of outdated magazines, when the telephone on the small counter rang. The sound cut through the dull hum of coughs and murmured conversations. It was my daughter calling. My only daughter, Linda. Her voice reached me through the static line, calm and flat, in a way that sent a chill down my spine. "Mom," she said, "we're leaving for Europe tomorrow. I already sold your beach house and your car. We needed the money. Bye." The line went dead before I could even respond. For a few seconds, I just sat there frozen, holding the receiver as if it could somehow bring her back. 45 years of raising her, of loving her, and of sacrificing every piece of myself for her comfort, and she had discarded me like a used handkerchief. But instead of screaming or breaking down, something inside me stilled. I inhaled deeply and even smiled, because there was something my dear Linda did not know. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I am 71 years old, and until that moment, I believed I knew my daughter. I had been a widow for 6 months. My husband, Walter, died suddenly one quiet morning while we were having breakfast. Just as we had done together for 45 years, I can still see it clearly. The soft light coming through the kitchen window, the coffee percolating on the stove, and Walter sitting across from me with his newspaper folded neatly beside his plate. He poured my coffee, added a little cream, and handed me a slice of toast. Then, as always, he kissed my forehead and said, "Good morning, my love." Those were his last words. He collapsed seconds later, and the world I knew crumbled with him. After that day, Linda became more present, or at least that's what I thought. She visited 3 times a week, helped me arrange the funeral, and often accompanied me to the market or to the doctor's office. "Mom, you have to take care of yourself now that you're alone," she would say, smiling that same soft smile I once believed was filled with love. I see it differently now. It was a smile of convenience, not affection. Our beach house in Santa Monica had always been our sanctuary. Walter and I bought it when Linda was 15. After years of saving every spare dollar, every summer we'd go there, bringing life and laughter to its little cream-colored rooms. We celebrated birthdays, holidays, and countless sunsets on that porch that faced the ocean. Linda brought her friends, later her boyfriends, and eventually her husband, Frank Porter. I cooked for everyone, washed their clothes, made their beds, cleaned up the sand they tracked into the kitchen. It was our family tradition, my joy. Never, in all my life, did I imagine that she would someday see that home merely as an asset to be liquidated. And then there was the old Ford F-100 pickup, Walter's pride and joy. He treated that truck like his own child. Every Sunday morning, no matter how tired he was from work, he would roll up his sleeves and wash it until the paint shone. He changed the oil with the same precision he once applied to his bus routes, and he always parked it under the same jacaranda tree, where the purple blossoms sometimes landed like confetti on the hood. Linda knew what that truck meant to me. She knew it still smelled faintly of him, the tobacco, the aftershave, the ghost of his presence. When the call ended, I stayed seated on that uncomfortable green chair, surrounded by people coughing and flipping through worn magazines. For the first time in months, I didn't cry. Something inside me shifted. Something quiet but powerful. It was not anger. It was calm. Because at that exact moment, I remembered something I had completely forgotten. 3 days before he died, Walter had given me a manila envelope. "Nora," he said, "keep this in the top drawer of your dresser. If something happens to me, open it later only when you feel ready." I placed it in the drawer, thinking it was probably another insurance document or receipt. Then he died, and the weeks that followed were a blur of grief, visitors, and endless arrangements. The envelope disappeared into the fog of my sadness. But now, sitting there in that sterile waiting room, the memory of it came back to me with startling clarity. I could almost see it, the dull brown paper, my name written in his careful cursive. My heartbeat quickened. When the nurse called me into the office, I obeyed mechanically. The doctor examined me and said I was in good health for my age, that I only needed more rest and a better diet. I nodded, pretending to listen. But my thoughts were elsewhere, circling that forgotten envelope like a moth drawn to light. I left the clinic and walked slowly toward the bus stop. According to Linda, I no longer had a car. She had sold it, along with the house. The Los Angeles sun was merciless that afternoon. Reflecting off the chrome bumpers of passing cars, I clutched my handbag, waiting for the bus. And despite everything, I smiled. There was something poetic about it all. My daughter thought she had stripped me of everything. But what she didn't realize was that Walter had always been a man who planned ahead. When the bus arrived, I took a window seat and watched the city slide by the laundromats, the diners, the rows of modest houses, each one containing its own little tragedy. I thought about how life was full of people carrying silent burdens. Mine, I now realized, might not be as hopeless as I had once believed. When I got home, I went straight to my bedroom. The air felt heavy with memories. I opened the dresser drawer, and there it was, the manila envelope, exactly where I had left it. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I could feel that there were multiple documents inside. On the front, written in Walter's neat handwriting, was my name Nora. I sat on the edge of the bed we had shared for so many years. Outside, the sky was fading into twilight, and the room filled with that gentle golden light that always made me think of him. He hesitated, then tore the flap open carefully, as though opening a gift. Inside were legal papers, deeds, bank certificates, and a letter written by Walter himself. As soon as I saw his handwriting, tears blurred my vision. My dearest Nora, the letter began. If you're reading this, it means I am no longer beside you. Please forgive me for keeping things from you. I only wanted to protect you from worry. Over the years, I invested our savings in properties and small businesses. We have more than you realize. My breath caught. As I continued reading, my hands started to tremble. Walter revealed that we didn't just own the beach house, we had 6 other properties, including the apartment building where Linda and Frank lived. He also held shares in 3 companies whose combined value was greater than anything I could have imagined. You are wealthy, my love, he wrote. You always were. But now, on paper, you are too. I sifted through the documents in disbelief. There were deeds for houses scattered across Los Angeles, one in Echo Park, another in Pasadena, a small motel by the coast, and, of course, the 20-story apartment building on Wilshire where Linda lived. I learned that Walter had quietly placed everything under a corporation called Hayes & Co., making himself invisible as the owner, and, according to the last clause in the documents, I was now the sole heir and director of that company. There were also bank statements from Western National Bank listing accounts with numbers that looked surreal to me. Walter, my bus-driving husband, who had spent 4 decades wearing the same Navy uniform and carrying his lunch in a brown paper bag, had somehow turned our modest savings into a fortune. He had multiplied every penny we ever earned, and I never knew. In his letter, he explained why. You know our daughter, Nora, he had written. If Linda ever knew how much we truly had, her attitude would change. I wanted her to love us for who we are, not for what we own. The irony cut deep. My daughter had abandoned me, believing I was broke, when in truth I had everything, and she had nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered from room to room, touching the furniture we had bought together, the dishes we had used for decades, the framed photos on the wall. I stopped in front of one picture, Linda at 5 years old, sitting on Walter's lap, both of them laughing. I could almost hear her giggles. That sound so bright and pure, it once filled my heart with pride. Where had that little girl gone? When had she turned into a stranger who could sell her own mother's home without a second thought? The next morning, I woke before dawn, restless. The house was silent, except for the ticking clock in the hallway. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from the cup. The phone rang suddenly, making me jump. I hesitated before answering. It was Linda again. Her tone was softer this time, almost rehearsed. "Mom, how are you?" she asked sweetly. "I wanted to tell you we already transferred the money from the house and the truck. We deposited your share into your account. It's not much, but it'll help you live for a few months while you find something smaller." "My share?" I asked quietly. "Yes. Mom, we wouldn't leave you with nothing. We gave you 30%. That's fair." "Right." Frank found a wonderful investment opportunity in Europe. It's really going to change our lives. 30% of what was already mine. How generous. I forced my voice to stay calm. "I see. And when are you leaving this afternoon?" She replied cheerfully. "Our bags are packed. We'll be gone for at least 6 months. Maybe more if things go well. But don't worry, we'll help you find a little apartment when we're back. Something that fits your needs." Fits my needs. The words echoed in my mind like an insult. "All right. Linda, have a safe trip," I said evenly. "Oh, Mom, I knew you'd understand. You've always been so compassionate. We love you so much." Then, once again, she hung up. I stood there holding the receiver to my chest. And then something unexpected happened. I laughed. It started as a quiet chuckle and grew until I was nearly out of breath. For the first time since Walter's death, I laughed. The absurdity of it all struck me. My own daughter had robbed me blind, taken my home, my car, and then patted herself on the back for being kind enough to give me a fraction of what was already mine. But it wasn't the money that hurt the most. It was the ease with which she had erased me from her life. The speed with which she had turned love into transaction. 45 years of motherhood, of sleepless nights, and countless sacrifices, all reduced to a 2-minute phone call. When I checked my account later that afternoon, I found the deposit she mentioned. To Linda. It must have looked like a generous amount. To me, it was a mockery. They had sold the beach house for less than half its real value, probably desperate for quick cash, and Walter's truck for barely enough to buy new tires. I looked out the window just in time to see Linda and Frank loading their luggage into a yellow taxi. He was carrying 2 enormous suitcases. She a small but expensive-looking carry-on. They looked so carefree, laughing, whispering promises about their European dream. Neither of them turned toward my window. Not even a wave. When the taxi drove away, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and Walter's documents spread before me. The sunlight caught the edge of the gold lettering on one of the certificates, Hayes & Co. Holdings, Inc., and a sense of purpose slowly replaced my sadness. I could have gone to the police or hired a lawyer to accuse them of fraud. But something inside me said there was a better way, a quieter, more poetic kind of justice. I reached for the rotary phone and dialed the number of Arthur Bennett, the attorney who had handled Walter's affairs. He had been at the funeral, a kind man with tired eyes, and had told me to call him if I ever needed help. Well, the time had come when he answered. His voice was warm. "Mrs. Hayes, how good to hear from you. How are you doing? I'm managing." "Mr. Bennett," I said, keeping my tone steady. "But I need to see you urgently. I found some documents of Walter's that I don't quite understand." "Of course," he said. "Come by my office tomorrow morning. I'll clear my schedule." That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply. I dreamed of Walter sitting in his favorite armchair, reading the newspaper, his glasses sliding down his nose. When he looked up at me, he smiled. "It's about time, my love," he said softly. "It's about time you stood up for yourself." When I woke, I felt something new. Not joy, not exactly peace, but determination. For the first time since his death, I had a purpose. I was going to reclaim what was mine, but not in the way my daughter expected. The next morning, I dressed with more care than usual. I chose the wine-colored dress Walter used to say made me look elegant and dignified. I pinned my hair back, dabbed a touch of rouge on my cheeks, and slipped into the small pair of pearl earrings he'd given me for our 20th anniversary. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a face I hadn't recognized in a long time, a woman who looked calm, resolute, and strangely alive again. Arthur Bennett's office was in downtown Los Angeles, in one of those older marble buildings that still smelled faintly of cigar smoke and furniture polish. The elevator creaked as it rose to the 4th floor. When the doors opened, I saw Arthur's name stenciled in gold letters on frosted glass. Bennett and Associates, attorneys at law. He greeted me warmly, rising from behind his mahogany desk. "Mrs. Hayes, it's good to see you. Please, sit down." I thanked him and handed over the folder of documents Walter had left me. As he examined each sheet, his eyebrows slowly climbed higher. Finally, he looked at me in astonishment. "Mrs. Hayes, this is extraordinary." Walter was not only a careful man, he was brilliant. "According to these papers, you are the owner of multiple properties, all perfectly legal and fully in your name through his corporation." I had no idea. "I didn't either," I said softly. "But now that I do, I need to know what can be done." Arthur leaned back, adjusting his glasses. "Everything is in order. You are the rightful owner of every one of these holdings. But there's something else. The sale of the beach house was unauthorized. Your daughter had no legal right to sell it." My pulse quickened. "Then I can get it back?" "Yes." He nodded. "We can have the sale annulled immediately. The buyers are innocent. They'll simply be refunded. You could also pursue legal action against your daughter for fraud." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Mr. Bennett. I don't want to take her to court. I want to handle this differently. And quietly. For now, no one must know I'm behind any of it." He hesitated, clearly curious, but he didn't press. "Of course. You're my client. What would you like me to do?" "I want the beach house back. Discreetly. I want every property restored under my direct control, especially the building where Linda and Frank live. But no one can know that I'm the one pulling the strings." Arthur smiled faintly, perhaps amused by my resolve. "It will take a few weeks to complete the transfers, but it can be done." "Good," I said. "Then let's begin." When I left his office, the city seemed sharper, more vivid than it had in months. The noise of traffic, the smell of the bakery on the corner, even the pigeons scattering near the fountain, all of it felt like signs of life returning. I walked for blocks before taking the bus home, a strange lightness in my chest. I had a plan, and it was mine alone. The following weeks became the strangest of my life. Outwardly, I was the poor widow abandoned by her only child. In secret, I was a woman orchestrating her own quiet redemption. Arthur worked diligently. Every few days, he called with updates. The court accepted the annulment of the sale. He said one morning, "Within 2 weeks, the title for the Santa Monica property will return to your name." I thanked him calmly. Though my heart raced, I decided to stay in my little house in Los Angeles for the time being. Walter had built that home for us after the war, and every inch of it carried his touch. Linda had probably expected me to sell it and move into some cheap rented room. But that was not going to happen. Every morning I brewed my coffee, set the table for one, and looked out at the garden Walter had planted years ago. The neighbors often watched me with a mix of pity and curiosity, as if I were some living cautionary tale. Ruth Parker, my next-door neighbor since the 1952nd, came by one afternoon while I was watering the geraniums. "Nora, sweetheart," she said, leaning over the fence. "Is it true that Linda went off to Europe and left you here all by yourself?" I wiped my hands on my apron and smiled faintly. "Yes." "Ruth." "She went with Frank. They have business plans over there." Ruth frowned, shaking her head. "And how are you going to manage?" "Dear, everyone thought Walter didn't leave much behind." "If only you knew." I thought, "Don't worry, Ruth. I'll manage just fine." She sighed. "If you need anything, I can bring over some supper or help with groceries." "You're very kind, but I'm all right," I assured her. She gave me that look I'd seen so often after Walter's funeral, pity mixed with relief that it wasn't her own burden to bear. "Well, you know where to find me," she said before returning to her house. That kind of conversation became routine. The butcher, the baker, even the girl at the corner store, they all spoke to me in the same soft, sympathetic tone reserved for the unfortunate, and every time, I nodded and thanked them politely. While inside, a quiet satisfaction grew. I was living a double life, and oddly, I found power in it. "Trevexlotter." Arthur called with the words I had been waiting for. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "I have excellent news. The sale of the beach house has been fully annulled. The buyers weren't aware of the fraud, so they were refunded without issue. The property is now legally yours again." "Wonderful, Mr. Bennett," I replied, feeling my throat tighten. "And the apartment building, that's a bit more complex," he admitted. "Technically, you've always been the owner through Hayes & Co. But to take full control, we'll need to reassign administrative rights. That should take about 2 weeks." "Perfect," I said. "Keep me informed." After hanging up, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat quietly at the kitchen table. Outside, the afternoon sun spilled across the floor, illuminating the pattern of the old linoleum. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Linda had been gone for 3 weeks. Not a single letter, not a phone call, not even a postcard. I had vanished from her life the moment she had the money she wanted. But deep down, I knew that absence wouldn't last forever. 2 days later, I decided to visit the beach house. The bus ride to Santa Monica took over an hour, the same route Walter and I had taken countless times. I sat by the window, watching as the cityscape gave way to ocean light. When I stepped off the bus, the salty wind hit my face, and I felt tears sting my eyes. There it was, the little cream-colored bungalow, standing exactly as it had before. The porch still faced the Pacific. The waves still rolled rhythmically onto the sand. The new owners had added a few potted plants by the steps, but otherwise, everything was the same. I stood across the street, staring for a long time. The memories flooded back Linda as a child running barefoot along the sand, Walter grilling fish on the old barbecue while I chopped vegetables in the kitchen. The sound of laughter carried by the sea breeze. All those summers, all those birthdays and holidays, reduced to a line on a sales contract. After a while, a gray-haired gentleman came out of the house, carrying a toolbox. He noticed me and walked closer. "Are you all right?" "Ma'am," he asked politely. "Yes?" "Thank you," I said, just reminiscing. I knew the people who lived here before. "Ah, yes," he said, his face softening. "Terrible situation, wasn't it? They told us the elderly lady was very sick and needed to sell quickly. We thought we were doing her a favor, buying it fast. Then the lawyers called and said the sale wasn't legal, so we had to give it back. What a mess." "I see," I murmured, forcing a smile. "They said the daughter handled everything because the mother couldn't," he continued. "It's so sad when families go through things like that. If only you knew." I thought, well, I'm glad it worked out for you. Is it kindly? Yes. We got our money back. Thank heavens. Though we'll miss this place, it's lovely. I watched him leave and stood there for a long moment, the sea breeze tugging at my dress. I felt both relieved and hollow. It wasn't just the betrayal or the loss. It was the way Linda had used lies about my health, pretending I was feeble, to justify her actions. She had turned me into a fiction. That evening, I called Arthur again. "Mr. Bennett," I said, "I need your help with something else. I want Walter's truck back." "That may be trickier," he warned. "The vehicle was in your name, but your daughter had power of attorney to sell it. How is that possible, apparently? You signed that document yourself a few months after your husband's passing. Do you recall for a moment?" He felt dizzy. Then the memory returned. Linda, arriving one afternoon with a folder full of papers, assuring me they were needed for the funeral and inheritance paperwork. I had been numb, exhausted, lost in my grief. I had signed without reading. How naive I had been. "I remember," I said quietly. "And I suppose that's when she began planning all of this." "It seems likely," Arthur said gently. "We can try to recover the truck, but we'd need to prove you signed under deception. Then let's do it," I replied. My voice came out firmer than I expected. "I want back everything they took from me." The days that followed settled into a peculiar rhythm. In public, I remained the lonely widow everyone pitied. I went to the grocery store, exchanged polite greetings, and carried on as though my life were small and sad. But in secret, I met with Arthur, signed papers, read progress reports, and quietly pieced together the empire my husband had left me. Every night, before going to bed, I'd look at Walter's photograph on the nightstand and whisper, "I'm doing it. My love, I'm taking back what's ours." Outside, the neighborhood lights flickered one by one, and the hum of Los Angeles faded into silence. Somewhere across the ocean, Linda probably believed she had escaped with everything. But she was wrong. She had underestimated me. I was not just an old woman clinging to memories. I was the wife of a man who planned for every possibility, and now I was the one carrying out his final plan. And I would not stop until every last piece of what was ours had been returned to where it belonged. In the afternoons, though, I turned into a businesswoman. I pored over Walter's papers, spoke with Arthur Bennett, and mapped out my next move. I learned principles of finance I never imagined I would have to understand. I realized Walter had been far more astute than I had ever given him credit for. Every single one of his investments had been chosen with painstaking care. The tower where Linda lived, for instance, was valuable for more than its rent rolls. It sat in a district that was climbing in value at a remarkable pace. I also uncovered that Frank, my daughter's husband, was buried in debt. He had taken out loans using their apartment as collateral, never grasping that he was not the true owner at all. Once the banks uncovered that fact, he was bound to be in very serious trouble. One Friday, Arthur telephoned with news that changed everything. Mrs. Hayes, all the filings are complete. You now have full control over all your properties. I also recovered Walter's pickup. The buyer turned out to be an acquaintance of mine. And after I explained, he agreed to return it in exchange for a modest consideration. Excellent work, Mr. Bennett, I said. Now I need one more favor. I want you to send a letter to my daughter. What sort of letter? An eviction notice? There was a long pause on the line. Mrs. Hayes, are you certain you want to proceed? Absolutely. She decided I did not matter in her life. Now she will learn exactly how much I matter. I understand. Shall I forward it to Europe? No. Deliver it when she returns. I have a feeling that will be very soon. I was not mistaken. That very afternoon, Ruth Parker hurried across my lawn with the latest neighborhood whisper. Nora, did you hear Frank is in hot water with the bank? My brother-in-law works there, and they are looking into loans he took against the apartment. But it turns out the apartment is not his at all. Truly, yes. And it seems Linda knew nothing about it. They say she will have to come back from Europe to deal with the mess. What a tangle! I murmured. The worst part, Ruth added, lowering her voice, is that apparently Frank lied about the business overseas. There was no venture. He only wanted to run from his debts here. Perfect. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had anticipated. Linda had placed her faith in Frank, had sacrificed her bond with me for him, and now she was discovering that he was not the man she imagined. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and lifted my eyes to the stars. Walter used to say the stars were the souls of those who had lived full lives, keeping watch over their families from above. If that was true, then he was up there, observing as his design came together with precision. Thank you, my love, I whispered to the night. Thank you for protecting me even after you are gone. The next morning, Arthur called early. Mrs. Hayes, I have news. Your daughter just arrived back in the country. She is at the airport alone. Alone, yes. Apparently Frank stayed in Europe. There are rumors of a very bitter argument. I see. Did you send the letter? I am sending it today. She should receive it tomorrow. I set the receiver down and stood in the kitchen, feeling nervousness twined with anticipation. After so many weeks of quiet preparation, the moment for the first visible move had finally come. Linda arrived at the apartment on a Tuesday night. I knew because Ruth, who seemed to have informants on every block, came by the next day to report. Nora, your daughter came home last night. I saw her go in with one suitcase. She looked awful, so pale, with shadows under her eyes, as if she had cried through the entire flight. Alone. Completely alone. And something odd, the doorman asked for her keys, and she did not have them. The superintendent had to let her in with the emergency set. Interesting, I said. If Frank had the keys, he had likely decided not to come back. Or perhaps Linda had learned the truth about him and fled. Either way, my daughter was home, and soon she would receive my little welcome. That same afternoon, Arthur called again. Mrs. Hayes, the notice was delivered an hour ago. The doorman confirmed your daughter received it in person. Good. How much time did we grant her? 30 days to vacate. As required. He hesitated. But Mrs. Hayes, are you entirely sure she is your daughter? Mr. Bennett, my daughter forced me out of my own home with a 2-minute phone call. She sold my belongings without a word. She treated me like refuse. Now she will learn that actions have consequences. I understand, he said gently. I merely wanted to be certain you had weighed every implication. I have considered them all. Mr. Bennett. That night, sleep would not come. I lay awake picturing Linda's face as she read the notice, the first flicker of confusion, the quick flare of disbelief, and then the rising panic. She would likely assume it was a scam, but when she called to confirm, she would discover that every line was completely lawful. The next morning, as though she had been waiting for my voice, the phone rang at 8 o'clock. Linda sounded desperate. Mom, I need to speak to you. It's urgent. Good morning, darling, I said lightly. How was Europe, Mom? I cannot talk about that now. I received a very strange letter yesterday. It says I have to vacate my apartment in 30 days. That has to be a mistake. Right. Do you know anything about it? An eviction notice. How odd. From whom? From a company I have never heard of. Let me check the letter. Hayes & Co. Holdings. Inc. Do you know this company, Walter, had even used our own name for the corporation? The symmetry of it felt almost poetic. No. Dear, I have never heard that name. Are you sure the letter is genuine? That is exactly what I am trying to find out. Mom, I need your help. I do not know what to do. Frank left me in Europe. He ran off with another woman. And now I come back to this. I do not understand what is happening. There it was, the confirmation. Frank had abandoned her. Perhaps when the money ran dry, or when he realized the legal problems at home were far more serious than he had guessed. Poor Linda. She had traded her family for a man without character. I am sorry. Sweetheart, where are you now? I am at the apartment. But I do not know for how long. Would you like to come see me? I asked. Mom, I need to talk to someone. I do not have anyone else. The irony was perfect. Stripped of the man for whom she had discarded me, she remembered she still had a mother. Of course. Love? Come whenever you wish. I am on my way, she said. I set down the phone and examined myself in the hallway mirror. I needed to look exactly as she expected, the picture of a fragile mother who had been wronged. I put on my most conservative gray dress, pinned my hair into a tidy bun, and practiced the expression of a worried yet resigned widow. When Linda arrived, she would see precisely the role she had written for me. An hour later, I opened the door to find her standing there. I was startled by how much she had changed. She had lost weight. Dark circles bruised her eyes. The expensive clothes looked rumpled and unkempt. Her eyes were red, the rims raw from crying. Mom, she said, and for a moment, it looked as though she would embrace me, but she stopped, as if suddenly remembering how she had left things between us. Come in, dear. Would you like some coffee? Yes. Please. We sat in the kitchen at the same table, where, weeks earlier, I had spread out Walter's papers. In that familiar chair, Linda seemed small, almost like the girl who used to come to me with schoolyard troubles. Mom, she began, I am so sorry for how I left. I know I treated you terribly. It is in the past. Darling, I said. No, it is not. I spoke horribly to you. And now her voice fractured. Now I have no one. What happened with Frank? I asked. He ran off with a 25-year-old waitress from a hotel in Paris. There was never any business in Europe. It was all a lie. He only wanted to escape the debts here and use the money from selling your house to fund his little adventure. All the debts, yes. Mom, he had so many. It seems he had been taking out loans for years, using our apartment as collateral. And now I find out he was never the owner. How can that be here? lay my opportunity? I do not know. Dear, property issues are complicated. The problem now is the banks are coming after me for his debts, she said, wringing her hands. They say because we are married. I am also responsible, and on top of that, the eviction notice. Mom, I do not know what to do. I have no money. I have no job. I have nowhere to live. She began to cry real tears, the kind that come from the deepest part of the chest. For a moment, my mother's heart softened. I wanted to wrap her in my arms, tell her everything would be all right. But then I remembered the iciness in her voice at the clinic, the ease with which she had dismissed me, how she had spoken as if I were a burden to shed. Have you spoken to a lawyer about the letter? I asked gently. I cannot afford a lawyer. Mom, we spent everything in Europe. Frank took what little remained when he ran off with that woman. So what will you do? I do not know. I thought, perhaps I could stay with you for a while, just until I find work and can rent a small place. There it was, the question I had been waiting on. After forcing me out of my own home, after selling what was mine, after treating me like something to be scraped from her shoe, she wanted me to save her. She wanted the helpless widow she had invented to rescue her from the consequences of her choices. Of course. Dear, I said softly, this will always be your home. She stared at me, surprised, as if she had expected a fight. Truly. Mom, after everything, you are my daughter. Linda, that will never change. She rose and hugged me, then a desperate embrace from someone drowning who has finally found a handhold. I hugged her back as well, but not with the unthinking, unconditional love I had once offered. In my arms there was calculation now, and a plan. Thank you, Mom, she whispered. I promise I will find a job soon. I will not be a burden to you. Do not worry about that today. I told her. Rest first. Then we will see what options you have. She left that afternoon to gather a few belongings from the apartment. I remained in the kitchen, reflecting on how easily events had aligned. She had come to me exactly as I had imagined, broken, desperate, without options. Best of all, she suspected nothing. To her, I was still the abandoned mother who needed her compassion, but this was only the opening movement of my plan. Having her under my roof would give me the perfect stage for what came next. I intended to let her settle in, feel safe, and believe she had found refuge in my house. And then, when she least expected it, I would show her the difference between poverty chosen with purpose and poverty earned through consequence. That night, I called Arthur. Mr. Bennett. There is something more. Tell me, Mrs. Hayes. I want you to investigate Frank's debts. I want to know exactly how much he owes, to whom, and what legal paths exist to separate those obligations from my daughter. That will take time, he said, but it is feasible. Good. And, Mr. Bennett, this must remain absolutely secret. No one can know I am behind it. Of course, he replied. May I ask what your endgame is? My plan is simple. I said, I am going to save my daughter. But first, she must learn what it truly means to hit the very bottom. When I hung up, I poured a glass of the wine Walter had set aside for special occasions. It had been a long time since a day felt worthy of such a bottle. The game had begun, and for the first time in months, I held all the winning cards. Linda moved into my house the next day. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box, everything that remained of the life she had chosen. I watched her unpack in her old bedroom, the one she had slept in as a teenager, and the humiliation in each of her movements was plain to see. She had fallen from a luxury condominium to the shelter of her childhood room. "Mom, I found this in the apartment," she said, holding up a manila envelope. "It was among Frank's things. It has your name on it." It was another of Walter's envelopes. My heartbeat quickened, but I kept my face composed. "My name, how odd." "Yes. Look," she said, handing it to me. It did indeed bear my name in Walter's handwriting, though it differed from the envelope I had discovered in my dresser, smaller, newer. Maybe Frank found it among Dad's papers after he died and forgot to give it to you. Linda offered. "That is possible," I said evenly. "May I see it?" I opened it while she watched. Inside was a brief letter and a small key. The note read, "Nora, if you are reading this after receiving the main envelope, it means our daughter is in a difficult hour. This key opens a safe deposit box at the Western National Bank downtown branch. The number is 247. There is something inside that can help you help her, but use it wisely. With eternal love, Walter." Linda read over my shoulder. "A safe deposit box, Dad. Had a safe deposit box? I had no idea." "I did not either." I lied smoothly. "Your father never mentioned this." "Do you think we should see what is inside?" she asked. "I am not sure," I said, letting the uncertainty hang. "But, Mom, there could be important papers or something valuable that could help us," she pleaded. Her desperation was almost tangible. Linda was grasping at any small ledge that might stop her slide, and I would let her hold on a little longer before showing her the entire truth. "All right," I said after a carefully measured pause. "We can go tomorrow?" That evening, we ate together for the first time in months. She cooked, wanting to be useful, but the food tasted faintly of remorse and fear. As we ate, she told me more about Europe, each detail worse than the last. Frank lied about everything. Mom, not just the business, but the debts too. I thought he owed only a little, but it turns out he owes more than $100,000. And the worst part is he used my name for some of the loans without telling me. How could he do that? He forged my signature. When we married, I gave him certain documents so he could handle the banking for our joint account. I never imagined he would misuse them. "Do you have any way to prove you did not know?" "I do not know. The banks say that because we were married, I am responsible for all of it anyway. And the divorce, I do not even know where Frank is now. He vanished. His phone is disconnected. He does not answer letters or telegrams. Nothing. It is as though he disappeared." Perfect. Frank had scurried off like the rat he had always been, leaving Linda to face the wreckage on her own. In a way, he had done me a favor. "I am sorry, darling. I did not realize it was so bad." "I did not either. Mom, I thought Frank loved me, that we were building something together, but I was just an easy path to money and documents." She began to cry again. How could I be so foolish? How did I not see who he really was? It was tempting to tell her I had noticed the signs from the beginning, that I had tried to warn her, that Frank had never seemed reliable. But that would have shattered the role I was still playing, the tender, vulnerable mother. Love can blind us. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "do not be too harsh with yourself." "But it is not only my life I ruined," she whispered. "I ruined yours too. I treated you terribly. I took your house, your truck, your things, and all for a man who abandoned me at the first opportunity. Now we are two poor women trying to survive because of me. It is behind us. Linda, we will be all right." "No, it is not behind us. Now we are both in danger because of my mistakes. You lost everything Dad left you, and I lost my marriage and my future. We are two poor women trying to get by." If only she knew. At that very moment, I possessed more than she could imagine. I owned the building she had lived in. I could have solved all her problems with a single phone call, but it was not yet the time. The next day, we went to the bank. Linda was anxious yet hopeful. I maintained the appearance of a confused widow who understood little about finance. The clerk led us to the vault, verified my identification, and opened box number 247. Inside were jewels, so many jewels rings. Necklaces, bracelets, earrings. I recognized a few pieces as family heirlooms from Walter's side. Others were entirely new to me. There was also a letter listing the origin of each piece and its approximate value. Linda drew in a sharp breath. "Mom, this must be worth a fortune." "Do you think so?" "Yes, look at this emerald. And this pearl necklace." "Mom, Dad preserved a treasure here." According to Walter's note, the collection was valued at roughly $200,000. It was a considerable sum, yet nothing compared with the rest of what I held. It felt like finding loose change beneath the sofa cushions when a small fortune already sat quietly in the bank. What should we do with these? "Mom, I do not know." "Dear, they are family keepsakes." "But, Mom, we could sell some of them," she urged. In the afternoons, however, I became a different woman, entirely a businesswoman. I spread Walter's papers across the kitchen table, spoke with Arthur Bennett by telephone, and sketched out each next move with a steadier hand than I felt. I absorbed lessons in money management I never imagined I would have to learn. It dawned on me that Walter had been far shrewder than I had realized. Not one of his investments was accidental. Every choice bore the mark of careful calculation. Take the tower where Linda lived. It was not merely profitable from rents. The neighborhood itself was rising fast. The sort of place where value climbed quietly month after month. I also uncovered that Frank, my daughter's husband, was drowning in obligations. He had taken out loans with the apartment as collateral, never understanding that he was not the real owner at all. Once the banks pieced that together, he would be in very serious trouble. One Friday, Arthur called with the turn I had been waiting for. "Mrs. Hayes, the filings are complete. You now have total control of all your holdings." And I recovered Walter's truck. The buyer is an acquaintance of mine. When I explained the situation, he agreed to return it for a small consideration. "Excellent work, Mr. Bennett," I said. "Now I need one last thing. Send a letter to my daughter." "What kind of letter? An eviction notice?" Silence hummed on the line. "Mrs. Hayes, are you certain completely?" She chose to treat me as if I did not matter. Now she will learn precisely how much I do. "I understand. Shall I forward it to Europe?" "No. Deliver it when she returns. I have a feeling that will be very soon." I was right. That same afternoon, Ruth Parker rushed over with fresh neighborhood talk. "Nora, did you hear Frank is in trouble with the bank? My brother-in-law works there, and they are digging into some loans he took out against that apartment. But the apartment is not his." "Truly, yes. And word is Linda knew nothing. They say she will have to come back from Europe to sort everything. And the worst part, apparently there never was any business over there. Frank just wanted to run from his debts here." Perfect. Everything unfolded as I had anticipated. Linda had trusted Frank, thrown away her relationship with me for him. And now she was learning who he really was. That night I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and looked up at the stars. Walter used to say those lights were the souls of people who had lived fully, keeping watch over their families from the sky. If that was true, he was up there now, overseeing how neatly his plan clicked into place. "Thank you, my love," I whispered. "Thank you for looking after me even now." The next morning Arthur phoned early. "Mrs. Hayes, your daughter has landed. She is at the airport alone." Alone, yes. Apparently Frank stayed in Europe. Rumor is they quarreled badly. I see. Did you send the letter? I am sending it today? She should receive it tomorrow. I set the receiver down and stood in the kitchen, feeling a braid of nerves and anticipation. After so many weeks of quiet preparations, the moment had come for the first open move. Linda reached the apartment on a Tuesday night. I knew because Ruth, who seemed to have informants in every lobby, came by at breakfast. Nora, your girl came in late. One suitcase. She looked dreadful pale. Dark circles, as if she had been crying the entire flight. Alone. And something odd when the doorman asked for her keys. She had none. The superintendent had to let her in with the emergency set. Interesting. I said, if Frank had the keys, he had likely decided not to come back. Or perhaps Linda had learned enough to flee. Either way, my daughter was home, and very soon she would receive my little welcome. That afternoon, Arthur called again. Mrs. Hayes. Delivery confirmed. The doorman says your daughter accepted the notice in person. Good. How long did we grant her? 30 days to vacate? Per statute. He hesitated. Are you sure she is your daughter? Mr. Bennett. My daughter pushed me out of my own house with a 2-minute call. She sold my things without asking. She treated me like trash. She will learn that choices have consequences. I understand, he said gently. I only wanted to be certain you had weighed everything. I have weighed it all. That night I did not sleep. I lay awake picturing Linda's face as she read first confusion, then disbelief, then the rising panic. She would suspect a scam. Of course, but a telephone call would reveal that it was all perfectly legal. At 8 o'clock sharp the next morning, my phone rang. Linda's voice was frayed to the edge. Mom, I need to talk to you. It is urgent. Good morning. Dear, how is Europe, Mom? I cannot talk about Europe. I received a strange letter, an order to vacate in 30 days. That has to be a mistake. Do you know anything about it? An eviction notice. How odd. From whom? From a company I have never heard of. Let me look. Hayes & Co. Holdings. Inc. Do you know it? Walter had signed our name across the front of the lesson. Pudik. Really? No. Darling, I have never heard it. Are you sure the letter is genuine? That is what I am trying to find out. Mom, please help me. I do not know what to do. Frank left me over there. He ran off with another woman. And now I return to this. I do not understand any of it. So that was that. Frank had abandoned her perhaps when the money ran dry. Or when he grasped how serious the legal mess was at home. Poor Linda. She had traded her family for a worthless man. I am sorry. Sweetheart, where are you now? I am at the apartment. But I do not know for how long. Do you want to come see me, Mom? May I need to talk to someone. I have no one else. The irony was exquisite. Stripped of the man for whom she had discarded me, she remembered she still had a mother. Of course. Love, come whenever you like. I am on my way. I set down the receiver and studied myself in the hallway mirror. I had to look exactly as the role required the worried, fragile mother. I put on my most conservative gray dress, twisted my hair into a simple bun, and practiced the expression of quiet concern. When Linda arrived, she would see precisely the picture she expected: a poor, vulnerable widow. She came an hour later. When I opened the door, I was startled by how changed she was. She had lost weight. Her expensive suit was wrinkled and tired. Her eyes were swollen from crying. Mom, she said, stepping forward as if to hug me, then stopping short, remembering how she had left things. Come in, dear. Coffee, yes. please." We sat at the same kitchen table where I had read Walter's letter. In that chair, she looked small again, like the girl who used to come to me with schoolyard troubles. "Mom, I am sorry for how I left," she began. "I know I treated you badly. It is past." I said, "No, it is not. I said awful things, and now I have no one." Her voice cracked. "What happened with Frank?" "He left with a 25-year-old hotel waitress in Paris. There was never any business. He only wanted to escape his debts and spend the money from selling your house. All the debts, so many. Mom, he has been taking loans for years, using our apartment as collateral. And now I learn he never owned it. How is that possible? Here was my opening. I do not know. Dear, property can be complicated. Now the banks are after me," she said. "They say because we are married. I am responsible. And then this eviction. Mom, I have no money, no job, nowhere to go." She began to cry real tears, the kind that make a mother's arms ache to hold her child. For a moment I wavered. Then I remembered her icy tone in that clinic lobby. The way she reduced a lifetime to a transaction. "Have you spoken to a lawyer? I cannot afford one." We spent everything. Frank took the rest when he ran off. "What will you do? I do not know. I thought maybe I could stay with you for a little while, until I find work and rent a small place." There it was, the request I knew would come. After driving me out of my own home, selling what was mine, and treating me like refuse, she wanted me to rescue her. "Of course," I said softly. "This will always be your home." She stared as if she had expected a fight. "Truly, Mom, after everything, you are my daughter." "Linda, that does not change." She rose and hugged me, desperately, like a drowning person clutching a rope. I held her, not with the unquestioning love of before, but with a measured embrace. Strategy had replaced surrender. "Thank you, Mom. I will find a job quickly. I will not be a burden. Do not trouble yourself today. Rest. We will see the options tomorrow." After she left to fetch a few belongings, I remained in the kitchen, marveling at how neatly the pieces had slid into place. She believed me still, the abandoned mother who needed her compassion. But that was only the first act. With her living under my roof, I could stage the lesson correctly. I would let her settle, feel safe, believe she had found sanctuary then. When the lesson would land, I would show her the difference between being poor by choice and poor by consequence. That night I called Arthur. "Mr. Bennett, I need one more thing." "Yes." "Mrs. Hayes, investigate Frank's debts. I want exact figures, exact creditors, and every legal path to separate my daughter from them. That will take time, but it can be done. Do it, and keep my involvement absolutely secret. Of course, may I ask your ultimate intention?" "It is simple," I said. "I will save my daughter, but first she must understand what it means to strike the bottom." When I hung up, I opened a bottle of wine Walter had set aside for special occasions. It had been a long time since anything deserved such a cork. The next day, Linda moved in with 2 suitcases and a cardboard box, the last remnants of the life she had chosen. I watched her unpack in her old room and saw how every gesture carried humiliation. She had fallen from a luxury high-rise to the cramped bedroom of her teenage years. "Mom, I found this in the apartment," she said, holding out a manila envelope. It was among Frank's things. "It has your name on it." Another of Walter's envelopes. My heart thudded, but I kept my face still. My name, how peculiar. "Yes. Look." She handed it to me. Walter's handwriting. Unmistakable. But this envelope was smaller, newer than the one I had found in my dresser. Perhaps Frank found it among your father's papers and forgot to give it to you. Linda said. Perhaps. I replied. May I open it? Inside lay a short letter and a small key. Nora. The note read. If you are reading this after receiving the main envelope, our daughter must be in a hard season. This key opens a safe deposit box at the downtown branch of Western National Bank. Number 247. Inside is something to help you help her use it wisely. With eternal love, Walter. Linda read over my shoulder. A safe deposit box. I had no idea. Dad kept one. I did not either. I lied. He never mentioned it. Should we go see what is inside? I am not sure, I said, letting the doubt linger. But, Mom, there might be important documents or something valuable we could use, she pleaded. Her desperation was plain. I would let her cling to this hope a bit longer before revealing the greater truth. Very well, I said at last. We will go tomorrow. At the vault. The clerk verified my identification and opened box number 247. Inside lay jewels rings, bracelets, earrings, strands of pearls, a deep green emerald, settings that glinted under the fluorescent light. Some I recognized from Walter's family, others were new to me. A note inside listed each piece and an approximate value. Mom, this must be worth a fortune. Linda gasped. Do you think so? Yes, look at this emerald. And this pearl strand. Dad left a treasure here. Walter's note placed the collection near $200,000. A significant sum. Yes, but compared with everything else he had arranged, it felt like coins found under a cushion when you already had a fortune in the bank. What should we do? She asked. I do not know. Darling, they are family pieces. But, Mom, we could sell some. There it was again. Even in discovery. Linda's first instinct was to spend it fixing the wreckage Frank had made. She had not learned the real lesson yet. Are you certain you want to use your father's legacy to pay Frank's debts? I asked. What other choice do I have? Mon, if I do not pay soon, the banks will foreclose on everything. And technically, I own nothing. Everything is in Frank's name. Think carefully. Sweetheart, once these jewels are sold, you cannot call them back. I know. But what else can I do with these legal claims against me? I cannot get a job easily. Who would hire me? We took the jewelry home. Linda spread each piece on the kitchen table, studied them one by one, and made lists: what to sell, what to keep. It hurt to watch her turn decades of family history into columns and figures. Mom, I think I can get $180,000 for the lot, she said one afternoon, counting the cash she had raised in tidy stacks. It is less than I hoped, but enough to cover the most urgent debts. Are you sure you want to go through with it? I have no choice. If I do not pay soon, they will seize everything. They could even try to tie this house to it if they claim I have some connection to the properties. The irony was sharp enough to taste. Linda feared losing a house I owned, to pay the liabilities of a man who had abandoned her, using money from jewels left by the same man who had built the wealth that could save her. And how will you decide which debts to pay first? I asked. I spoke with a free advisor at the bank, she said. She told me to prioritize anything with real collateral. Those can trigger foreclosure quickly, in a matter of weeks. Suffering had made her both more cautious and more fragile. She who once sold my things without a word was now researching every choice as if learning a new language. That night, while she stacked documents and receipts in careful piles, Arthur called. Mrs. Hayes. I have the full report on Frank's debts. It is worse than we thought. How much worse he owes more than $200,000 to several banks and also to private lenders. More troubling. We found falsified documents bearing your daughter's signature. That potentially ties her. Legally. Can we get her out from under it? It will be complicated. If we can prove she did not know, we can unwind some, perhaps all. But it will be a long and expensive process. How expensive for a competent specialist? Roughly $50,000. With no guarantees. I understand. And if she simply pays them, that would be fastest if she had the funds. I doubt she does. Prepare everything necessary to remove my daughter from these debts. I said, but do not tell her yet. You are going to pay. Mrs. Hayes, I will do whatever is needed to protect her, but it must be done in a very particular way. When I hung up, I found Linda in the living room, staring at the remaining pieces with a small, stricken expression like a child who has broken a beloved toy and cannot imagine how to mend it. What are you thinking? Dear, I asked. About Dad, she whispered. About how disappointed he would be to see what I did with my life. Your father loved you. Linda, he would understand. No. Mom. He taught me to be responsible, to honor family, not to be selfish. And I did the opposite. I abandoned you for a liar. I sold our memories for cash. I ruined what he built. For the first time since she came home, I heard true remorse, less about consequences, more about the moral wound itself. People make mistakes. Love. I said quietly. What matters is what we learn. How do I learn from this? She asked. How do I repair the harm I have done? There it was, the question I had been waiting on. Linda was finally ready to face the truth of her choices. But it was not yet time to reveal my last card. First, she had to reach the very bottom. Over the next days, she sold most of the jewels, keeping only the engagement ring Walter had given me and a small necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. I watched her research prices, enter pawnshops and jewelers, bargain with strangers. It was painful to see memory reduced to merchandise necessary, though, for the lesson to root. Mom, I raised $180,000, she said one afternoon, counting the bills once more at the table. Less than I expected, but enough to cover the worst of it. Are you certain I have no choice? If I do not pay, they will foreclose. They could even come after this house if they prove any link. Again, the bitter symmetry. My daughter terrified of losing a home I owned. To pay a deserter's debts, with money left by the man whose wealth could have spared her entirely. How will you choose which to pay? First, I asked. The bank advisor said to start with the debts backed by property. Those move fastest toward foreclosure. In the span of a few weeks, Linda had changed so much. The woman who once sold my things without a second thought now weighed every decision as if it were glass. Pain had made her meticulous and human. That night, as she sorted statements into labeled envelopes, Arthur rang once more. Mrs. Hayes. We have located Frank. Where in Paris? As your daughter suspected. And there is more. He is trying to obtain residency through a sham marriage with the young woman he ran off with. A fake marriage, yes. She needs papers. He needs a way to remain without deportation. More importantly, we found evidence that he deliberately forged your daughter's documents with the intent to flee. That means Linda can be freed from the debts. With this evidence, yes, fraud and coercion. Your daughter would owe nothing for what Frank did behind her back. Perfect. At last I had a path to save Linda legally, without her guessing that I had the money to end the matter with a check. Begin the process at once. I told him, do not tell her. I want it finished before I speak. Understood. It will take about 3 weeks. Perhaps a month. Perfect. When I hung up, Linda looked over from the table. Who was that? Mom, a woman asking for Mrs. Davis on the corner, I said lightly. Wrong number. Lying had become disturbingly easy. With each day, my two lives settled more comfortably around me to Linda, the poor, abandoned mother. In truth, a wealthy woman orchestrating her daughter's rescue and her education. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Linda wrestle with choices she had never before faced, stretching money for groceries, bargaining with creditors, knocking on doors for work while her credit bled red. Cruel. Yes, but necessary? Mom, I went to 3 interviews today, she said one evening, shoes in her hand, feet swollen. 2 said they cannot hire me with the legal mess pending. The 3rd offered a part-time shift cleaning offices at night. Will you take it? I have no choice. It pays very little. But it is better than nothing. I can work at night and keep looking by day. Seeing my daughter, who had drifted through more than 4 decades of comfort, prepare to clean other people's desks made my heart ache. It also filled me with a new pride. For once, she was facing reality without expecting rescue. Are you sure you can manage the physical work I will learn? I cannot keep being your burden. Mom, it is bad enough that you let me stay here for free. This is your home. Linda, no. Mom, it is your home. I am here because of your generosity, but I will not take advantage forever. On her first night shift, Ruth stopped by to keep me company. We sat in the kitchen, sipping tea, eyes drifting to the family photos. Nora, may I ask you something? She said softly. Did you know Linda would return in this condition? What do you mean when she left? She was so sure of herself. She bragged about Europe, about Frank's success, and now she is back, completely broken, cleaning offices. Living with you. Life turns. I said, yes. Ruth nodded. But I see something else. She looks different. Not only sad, humble, as if she has learned something important. Ruth had always been perceptive. What do you think she learned? I asked. The value of what she took for granted, like having a mother who loves her without conditions. Perhaps. I said, Nora, when Linda left and treated you so cruelly, many of us thought you would never forgive her. But here you are, giving her a home. She is my daughter. I said simply, yes, but not every mother would do this, especially after what you endured. If only Ruth knew the whole truth, that I could have solved everything with a single call, yet chose to let Linda suffer just enough to learn the full lesson. Am I doing the right thing? I asked. You are doing what a good mother would do, Ruth said. But I also think Linda must truly understand what she lost when she abandoned you. She needs to value you not merely as a rescuer, but as the strong woman who built a steady life for 45 years. She needs to respect you, not just need you. Ruth had struck the center of it. That was the point of the entire plan. I did not want Linda to return out of desperation. I wanted her to return out of respect and grown-up love. And how does that happen? I think it is already happening. Ruth said, the way she speaks to you is not the way she used to. She is no longer the daughter who orders you about. She is a woman grateful to have you. That night, when Linda came home from work, she was exhausted but carried herself differently. She had earned those few dollars with her own hands, and it meant something. How was the first day hard? She said. But not as bad as I feared. The other women helped me. One of them, Mrs. Johnson, taught me how to clean more efficiently. Mrs. Johnson, yes, she is 60, has been cleaning offices for 20 years. Her husband left her with 3 young children. It is not the job she dreamed of, she said, but it gave her independence and dignity. She sounds wise. She is. She told me there are two kinds of people who end up in this line, the ones who never had opportunities, and the ones who ruined the opportunities they did have. She asked me which one I was. And what did you tell her? The truth? Linda said, I had every chance, family. A stable home, an inheritance, and I ruined it by following a worthless man. What did she say? She laughed a little and said, well, honey, at least you know exactly why you are here. That puts you a step ahead of most. Linda poured a glass of water and sat down. Mom, these weeks have been the hardest of my life, but also the most important. Why? Because I finally understand what matters. Not money, not the fanciest apartment, not impressing anyone. It is having people who truly love you, people still there when everything falls apart. Linda, no. Let me finish. You have every right to hate me. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I took what Dad left you. I treated you like a nuisance. And now I am here asking you to forgive me and take care of me. I forgave you a long time ago. Darling, I said, I have not forgiven myself. She whispered, and I will not until I prove that I have changed, that I have learned. The next morning, Arthur called again. Mrs. Hayes. Excellent news. The legal process is nearly complete. We can free your daughter from all of Frank's debts. It was time. After weeks of watching Linda struggle, work, and reflect, the moment had arrived to show her she was never alone, that someone had been guarding her steps from the shadows. Arrange a meeting. I told him, it is time for my daughter to know the whole truth. I turned my back on you when you needed me most. Yes, I treated you like refuse. Yes, and you rescued me anyway. Yes, but not the way you imagined. I did not rescue you by handing over money so you could repeat the same missteps. I rescued you by letting you strike the very bottom, so you could learn how to pull yourself back up. Arthur Bennett cleared his throat with quiet tact, stepping in just enough to be heard. Miss Hayes, your mother has covered every legal cost required to release you from Frank's liabilities. She has also reversed the fraudulent sales and restored the properties. You are entirely free of legal entanglements. And the cleaning job I took, Linda asked, half hopeful, half wary. You can leave it if you wish. I said, but I would rather you did not. Why? She whispered. Because that work is teaching you what ease never taught you: the worth of your own effort, the dignity of honest labor, the habit of valuing every single dollar you earn. Linda brushed away tears and looked at me with a steadiness I had not witnessed in years. It was not the gaze of a girl begging her mother. It was the gaze of a woman seeing another woman clearly. Do you forgive me? Mom, I forgave you long ago. Darling, the real question is whether you can forgive yourself. I am not sure I can. What I did feels beyond pardon. People fail. Linda, what matters is what we do once we see our failures. Arthur slipped from the room and left us with the hush of his office. We sat without speaking, letting the new shape of our lives settle between us like dust after a long storm. Mom, Linda said at last, I want you to know something. Even if there had not been money, even if you truly were the penniless widow I imagined, I would have learned exactly the same lesson. What lesson is that? That nothing outweighs having someone who loves you without condition. These last weeks, the only thing that kept me from breaking was knowing I still had a home with you, that no matter how completely I wrecked my life, you were still my mother. That will never change. Linda, I know. But I also know I can no longer treat that love as guaranteed. I have to earn it. Every day, by respect, by gratitude, by what I do. Not only by what I say. We left Arthur's office, not as a mother and daughter bound merely by blood and habit, but as two women who had chosen one another after enduring a test neither of us would have dreamed possible. The weeks that followed were for rebuilding. Though not in the way Linda expected, even now that she understood I had the means to smooth every rough edge in her life. She kept her night shift. "Mom, I need to finish what I began," she told me while buttoning her faded uniform. "I cannot just drift back into comfort and pretend none of this happened." "Are you certain? You do not need to carry a punishment forever." "It is not punishment," she said, tying her laces. "It is remembrance of the person I became and the person I intend to be." I watched her move about the room, shoulders squared, chin firm. Gone was the shattered woman who had arrived at my door in tears. In her place stood someone who had found a kind of nobility in common work. That afternoon, Ruth Parker came by. As she often did. "Nora," she said, dropping into the kitchen chair with a sigh. "The neighborhood is buzzing with odd talk." "What sort of talk?" "People say you are not nearly as poor as we all thought. Someone spotted Linda leaving a very fancy law office downtown and later saw her paying off a raft of debts at the bank. They say you have your beach place back and that somehow every one of Linda's legal troubles vanished. That takes money, Nora. Real money. People say a great many things." "Ruth." "Yes, but I have known you for more than 4 decades. Are you going to tell me I have been drinking tea with a stranger?" I poured her a fresh cup and sat opposite. "It is time I told someone the truth. Walter left me far more than anyone suspected." "Ruth, far more." "How much more?" "Enough that neither Linda nor I need ever worry about money again." Ruth stared into her cup as the reality soaked in. "Then why the charade? Why spend months letting everyone believe you had nothing because Linda needed a lesson she could not learn any other way?" I told Ruth everything, the ice-cold call from Europe, my quiet plan for measured justice, the weeks of watching my child reach the hard ground beneath her, and the moment of revelation in Arthur's office. She pressed a hand to her chest. "Nora, it is brilliant and terrible. Terrible. You allowed your own daughter to suffer when you could have eased it in an hour." "I know. And yet, if I had lifted her the instant she stumbled, she would have learned only that there is always a rescuer waiting in the wings to mop up the cost of bad choices." Ruth nodded slowly. "You are right. And do you think she has truly learned it?" "Look around," I said, gesturing toward the hallway where Linda's work shoes waited by the door. "She knows she has access to comfort, yet she chooses to work. She could rent a better place, but she stays here by choice. She has no debts chasing her now, but she is saving to help others in the very trap she escaped. She is helping other women, yes. She has befriended the ladies on her shift and is quietly covering daycare for a coworker who is barely getting by." Ruth's face softened. "That is not the woman who flew to Europe. No. This is a different Linda, altogether one who understands that money is a tool, not a trophy, and that real dignity comes from work and respect, not from gleaming things." That evening, when Linda came home, she found me reading. "Mom, I have to tell you something. Today, Mrs. Johnson asked if I was the daughter of the wealthy woman from the North Side. What did you say?" I told her yes, that you have enough for me, never to lift a finger again. "And what did she ask next?" "She asked why I was still working." Linda smiled. "So I told her the truth. I need to prove to myself that I can stand on my own 2 feet. "And what did she say?" She laughed and said, "Honey, that is the difference between being rich and playing rich. Your mother has taught you the real kind. Mrs. Johnson is a wise woman. She is." She helped me see it clearly. It is not how much money you hold, but how you hold it, how you use it, how you behave around it. Linda settled beside me on the sofa. "I have decided something. Mom, I am going to stay here, but not as a daughter returning to the safety of her mother's arms." "What would it be?" "Then a house shared by 2 grown women. I will pay my share. Help keep everything in order. and treat what we have as a partnership built on love and mutual respect. You do not have to do that. I do. Once I took your care as a given, I will not do that again. And your work, I will keep at it for now. But I am not wedded to night shifts forever. I want to go back to school slowly, step by step, earning each rung. I have been thinking about social work. There are so many people with no support at all. If we have resources, I want to turn them outward. It suits you, I said. And Frank Arthur told me he was arrested for a sham marriage and will be sent back soon. I do not care anymore. That chapter is closed. No bitterness, none. Frank did me a favor without meaning to. If he had not abandoned me, I would never have hit bottom. Without the bottom, I would never have learned to value what mattered. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without waking. My plan had done its work. Linda did not simply grasp the surface of the lesson. She had carried it down into her bones. Walter would have been half a year later. Life had a balance I would never have predicted. Linda completed her social work course with high marks, and I moved a portion of our resources into a foundation to help women facing violence in the home and abandonment in their bank ledgers. One morning, she stepped into the kitchen with an envelope in her hand. The university wrote back, "Mom, I was accepted into the master's program. I begin next term." That is wonderful news. We can cover the tuition at once? She shook her head. I have been saving for my job at the city. The pay is modest, but I have learned to live with what matters. I want to fund this part myself. It is who I am now. Later that week, Ruth stopped by as she did most Fridays. "I have to admit something," she said, pouring another cup of tea. "At first, I thought you were cruel. And now I think you are the wisest mother I have ever known. Look at your daughter. Truly look." We glanced toward the living room, where Linda bent over a stack of books, a pencil tucked behind her ear. The peace in her face did not come from comfort. It came from work and purpose. "Did you know," Ruth added, "that I saw her at the grocer buying produce for a family she is assisting? When I asked why she used her own money instead of the program budget, she said some needs are measured in love, not in lines on a form." That evening, Linda and I took our supper on the porch, a habit that had become our little ceremony. "Mom," she said, slicing a tomato, "I received a strange letter today." "From whom, Frank?" "Yes, from a French prison. He says he is sorry and wants forgiveness." "How do you feel?" "Nothing. Really. No anger. Not grief. No thirst for revenge. It is as if that life belongs to another girl from another time." "Will you write back no?" "Not from hatred, simply because there is nothing left to say. The woman I am now has nothing to discuss with the man who wrote that letter." Her voice had a quiet strength I admired. She had built it the hard way by falling and standing up again. "Do you know what this whole journey taught me?" she asked. "What did it teach you?" "That real love is not the voice that flatters you with what you want to hear. Real love tells you what you need to learn, even when it stings." Frank fed me sweet lies and promised a life of effortless silk. "You taught me that real wealth is built from work, respect, and relationships that do not have a price tag." When she went inside to study, I lingered beneath the stars and thought of Walter. I had promised him I would look after our girl, and at last I felt I had done it properly. I did not protect her by handing over money. I protected her by teaching her to protect herself. I did not lift her by fixing every problem. I lifted her by letting her learn how to repair what could be repaired. The next day, we drove the old truck to the beach house for our first visit, since I reclaimed it. Linda hesitated by the gate. Taking in the porch, her father had built the garden I had coaxed from stubborn soil. the windows that had watched our summers bloom and fade. "It looks the same," she said softly, "but I am not the same woman who sold it." Inside, she moved from room to room, fingertips passing over chairs and frames, eyes lingering on photographs. "Mom," she said at last, "I need to apologize specifically for this place. Not only for selling it, but for shrinking a lifetime of birthdays and holidays into a line on a sales contract. It is forgiven," I said. "This house holds decades of summer evenings. The porch Dad hammered together, the garden you kept alive, the beach where you taught me to swim, and I turned all of it into cash for a man who was not worth a bus ticket." She sank onto the sofa where Walter used to read on Sunday mornings. "Do you know what wounds me most? That when I sold it, I felt nothing. It was just another asset. Now I can feel Dad in every corner, hear his laugh, smell his coffee, see his glasses by the lamp. He is here. Linda, he always has been. I know. And I know he is proud of how you steered us through the..." We spent the day cleaning, cooking, fixing small things, ritual work, the kind that stitches memory back to meaning. At dusk, we sat on the porch, the ocean murmuring like a steady friend. "Mom, I have an idea," she said. "Let us turn this place into a temporary refuge for women leaving violent homes. Somewhere safe for them while they rebuild." "It is a beautiful thought," I said, feeling Walter's smile in the salt air. "The foundation can carry the costs, and you can oversee the program through your work. Are you sure you want our family sanctuary to become that? The best sanctuaries are the ones that open their doors. Your father always said a house becomes a home when it shelters those who need love." We drove back under a sky of bright pinpricks, and later, when the lights were out, I spoke to Walter in the quiet. "We did it. My love. Our daughter understands what matters." For the first time since he left this world, I felt his answer, warm and certain. "I knew you would. You are both stronger than you think." Justice had come to us not wearing the face of revenge, but the face of instruction, not swinging the hammer of punishment, but holding out the steady hand of transformation. In the end, what we gained was far dearer than money, an honest bond between a mother and a daughter, built on rock that no future storm could wash away. If this tale touched you, tell me which city your heart is listening from. I love meeting you in the quiet space of your words. And if stories like this one speak to you, your kind support helps me keep them coming. I am grateful for every thoughtful note you send. There are more true-to-life pieces I cannot wait to share. You will find some favorites waiting nearby. If you wish to stay close, subscribe and walk with me to the next story. With love, with respect, and with thanks.